Great to see so many people here. I think lots of you already probably know how to do this, but I'll give you my method. I think it's fairly straightforward. I'm going to talk to you about how I make clouds, and I'll show you the brushes that I use, and I'll give you a quick demonstration, and then probably for the last half I'll make a couple of landscapes that'll be quite quick. So since we're going to be looking at clouds, I think it's always a good idea to spend time looking at clouds to get some inspiration, and so I've got a photo here that I took recently of some clouds. This is a photo I took just as the sun was setting, and so you get really nice textures of the clouds being highlighted. I highlighted some things here that I try and reproduce in sketches that I make. So this is, at the top right you can see a gradient, which you use a soft brush to make. That you commonly see in clouds are the contrast areas where you get dark and light parts next to each other. And if you can include those in your clouds, that really tends to make them look more realistic. They also contain lots of layers, and so you tend to use layers to generate the overall effect. Also, it's important to get the lighting right, so a lot of clouds you tend to see darker underlayers and then lighter highlighted top areas where the sun's catching them. Can you see where I've highlighted with the stars? You can see although the sky's blue, that doesn't extend down to the horizon. So these effects here with the layers, with the contrast, with the gradients and the shading, these are the kinds of things that I'm trying to create in the cloud pictures that I produce. I spend quite a lot of time looking at clouds when I'm out walking, and also looking at pictures of clouds to try and get ideas for colour and for textures, for shading. I think it's really helpful to try and be observant about this. The brushes that I use, there's only a few brushes to generate these effects. The top three brushes are the brushes that I use all the time. The soft brush is used to generate those gradients, and the clouds brush from Roberto and the Clouds 2 brush from Crooked Path are the two that I probably use the most for generating the fluffy effects and the gradients. Not the gradients, the contrast. These brushes can be found in the nature section. If you want to upload these, you just go to nature and you'll be able to find these at the top of the list of brushes there. Okay, that's the end of the slides. I'm going to now do a bit of drawing and just to show you the effects and how I create them. Usually when I'm doing my pictures I'm using a retina sized canvas. The higher the resolution, the smaller the brushes will seem to be. Ways I'm using new layers for the clouds and then for layers of clouds on top. Roberto's clouds brush. So now I'm changing the opacity so it's not 100%. That gives you a little bit more of a layered effect. This is just to lay down some colour. It's okay, but I don't like the edges because you see the actual brush itself. You're trying to make it much less defined. That I use erase, and that helps to soften the edges a lot and also creates gaps which look more realistic. The clouds are on one layer and the blue sky's a separate layer. I use the on mode a lot because that helps you to put colour onto the layer, and so then you can highlight the cloud layer that you've just created. On, over and erase are used all the time, so I'm laying down some colour with over, then I'll erase bits, and I'll also use the on mode to highlight specific areas of the cloud on that layer. It's still look really flat, so I need to try and create some layers within that. With the soft brush you can generate those nice gradients. I'll just do the cloud on the right with the gradient. On mode, and I'm using a lighter colour, and I'll bleed in the lighter top with the darker bottom. One thing I've noticed is that you can generate a lot of the gradients within the cloud just within one colour. A lot of my skyscapes I'm using just one colour and then just going up and down with the dark and light bar. I'll just show you in a minute. A lot of the time I'm just working quite quickly, adding colour, taking it away, erasing bits. I'm not really trying to aim for anything, I'm just stopping when it looks okay, usually. You can see at the bottom left the contrast areas that have been created, where you create with the dark background and the light cloud in front. Those are really good when you're trying to create a larger skyscape. All I do usually is just build up layers and layers of these, and obviously this is a small restricted area, so it's hard to create the effect overall, but you can see the idea. I'm just adding and taking away layers and creating these fluffy areas. Okay, that's the idea. So I'll I'll move over to trying to do a landscape and see how that goes. Okay, you made me laugh, Serge. Contrast is really key, I think, Wendy. I think that's what really makes the drama in the picture quite often. What I'm going to try and do is use a similar range of colours, so this kind of orangey gold for the whole picture. Once I've created the landscape at the bottom, I'll be doing the clouds on layers below that so that they don't overlap with the land. I use a procedural tool that I saw Craig Art using, so it's the Webby tool, and I set it to less than 100% opacity, and then you can see layers built up. It's going to be a quick sketch. Normally I'm taking about 2 or 3 hours to do a sketch, so this is just going to be more like a prep sketch, but it'll give you a sense of the landscape I could do from it. When I've got some colours down, I'll resample them to add to further areas. The colours, I don't know how you choose them. Sometimes I'll use a reference to get a couple of colours that I really like combinations of. Others times I'll just randomly do it. It's hard to say. A soft brush to create a background that gives a sense of where the main blocks of colour will be. Ref picks can be really helpful. The good thing with clouds is it's impossible to copy them, but they can be really helpful to give you a sense of the scale or the lighting that you're trying to achieve. I'm trying to create some kind of stormy sky, and the clouds, they'll go right down to the horizon, which is usually what you would see. A new layer, I'm going to create the detail to create some of those fluffy areas and the contrast areas. Tabbing with the Clouds 2 brush from Crooked Path, and that creates the kind of soft areas and also the contrasty areas. Opacity up to 100%, and that really deletes certain parts. I think it creates these contrast areas really well when it's turned right up. I'm trying to make sure that there's no areas that look like the brush, so I'm not seeing repeating patterns. Using this brush, Seb, I think it's a great brush. I've tried to make my own brushes without getting anywhere near as good as this one. I'm going to use smudge in a minute. That's really good for creating rain effects, and also to bring this together it's good to put a wash over it of a light colour, and that really brings it all together. Use the clouds from Roberto for if I'm doing space sketches, and also to lay down the colour initially. It's nice to get down a lot of colour. I kind of like that cloud front going across now. I think what I'm going to try and do is add a few more clouds to the right, just to highlight a few areas, give it a bit more depth. Okay, the sky looks okay. The top left, I've left diffuse because I'm going to put more light from there, and also it creates more of a rain type effect. I'm going to use smudge now. I'm using the soft brush in smudge, and I'm going to keep the opacity quite low so I don't get too big a smudge. It's just really experimenting. It's hard to know how to do this. You just have to keep trying until it seems to look okay. It's more dark over to the right, but it's kind of the effect I was looking for, to try and get the light shining through the clouds and the stormy sky. It just needs to be darker on the right, I think, to make this a bit better. Okay, the landscape's a bit sketchy. I think that needs more detail, but that's basically the idea.